Alright, so I recently got done playing through Pokken Tournament. Yikes, I remember when this game first got unveiled, I thought it was like a joke and a really stupid sounding idea, especially considering I've never been too into Pokemon, and at the time wasn't into Tekken. But then after thinking about it for a while, I thought, with as diverse and interesting as a world as Pokemon has developed, it could translate to a decent fighter. And I don't know if this is the Tekken team or someone associated with them. Obviously, there's connections to Tekken, but you feel like someone with those connections, with a good concept, could, do something cool and interesting with it. So I warmed up to the game, especially after I did eventually get into Tekken. Still took me a while to pick it up, though. It wasn't until I do like Pokemon Snap, so I was excited for new Pokemon Snap when I finally picked that up, which was around when they did the one big update, which, on a side note, I really wish they did more updates. That would have been really cool. That was a really fun time, but I decided then was a good time to finally get Pokken, and it took me till now to play it. Main thing that got me to play it was the Nintendo Direct from, I don't know, like a month or so ago. I forget what the exact rumor was or anything, but I did see a couple people say maybe it's a hint at Tekken or Pokken Tournament 2. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I still haven't played that, so here we are. Overall, the game is better than I was expecting, which I guess I can't be too surprised. Like I said earlier, there was a lot of potential with the idea and the group they may have had to, execute this said idea. It plays really smooth. All of the playable Pokemon pretty much feel unique and fun. And something you wouldn't see in another fighter, which I think is important for, keeping you coming back. I feel like the story mode they had, the story itself was meh, but I feel like the structure they had for it was pretty unique and fun, at least from what I've played in the fighting genre. But I also personally didn't think, I know sometimes fighting games can get pretty brutal to, actually clear the main campaign. I don't think it was too bad for me, at least. I don't know where you'd consider my skill level, especially with some of the gameplay you're seeing on screen, but like the structure of the story is you need to rank up by doing, a set of 5 battles and you have to win at least 4 of them. And I didn't have an issue really doing that at all. Pretty much early on, I would always clear all 5 in the last 1 or 2 sets to unlock, the next part of the story. I think I was pretty solidly getting 4 out of 5, and there was only one time I got 3 out of 5, which you just broke even. You didn't advance. So I assume if you only won 2 or 1 that you would go down in progress. I'm not sure if that's accurate though. I guess some of the bosses and like the final boss were a little nerve-wracking and close, but I don't feel like they were too bad, especially compared to some others out there in the fighting genre. There was a decent amount of customization as well, not necessarily for the Pokemon themselves, which isn't too surprising, but for you have your own trainer you can customize. I made mine look like Ryu from Street Fighter as close as I could with the resources I had. And then you can even customize your the like announcer girl or whatever. You've probably seen her on like the bottom of the screen and whatnot, but you can also customize her outfit at least, which I thought was kind of interesting and unique. Not something I would have expected. I will say there is kind of post story campaign content, and that got quite a bit harder. I wasn't completely getting my ass kicked, but I did see a lot of other people saying online that yeah, it jumps pretty good there and it's pretty difficult. But yeah, I would like back out if I lost one of the early matches, and I was able to advance twice, so that's something. But yeah, I noticed it was gonna take forever to either, finally get enough good strings of matches or develop the skill needed to advance any further. Luckily, this is the deluxe version, so I actually saw online that there's some content I would be missing out on if this was the original, so luckily I don't have to worry about that, I guess. But still, I guess would have been cool to have some sort of unlockable other than, I think, titles or whatever you got. Too bad I don't think they ever really found a way to transfer saves either from like the original Wii U version to this. But yeah, the only major complaint, and I don't even know if I would call it a complaint, is sort of I'm very mixed on sort of the gameplay loop. Like you've probably noticed in the gameplay in that you have a field phase where it's kind of more like an arena fighter, and a I don't even remember what they call it, but there's another phase where it's more of like a 2D fighter. And it's like, I appreciate them doing something new, but especially for at least a new IP in the fighting genre itself, I would have rathered more of a focus on one or the other, especially when you're trying to learn all these characters and such. I would have rathered this have been, like, I don't know, a special mode in this game, or maybe put this in the sequel, or have a spin-off of, this or Tekken or whatever for this idea. I think it's a good idea, but I just felt kind of weird about it being in this particular game. Also, I'll note, I don't know if I'm crazy or what, but you'll notice a couple of the stages I've been playing on, I don't remember them from the campaign, and I thought that I would have if they were in the campaign. Were they not there? There's the one, like, dojo area where you can see Mokujin in the background. I feel like I would have remembered that. Cool to see Mokujin here. I wasn't really expecting, because there wasn't really any, at least from what I noticed, sort of references directly to Tekken characters and that sort of thing. And then the other stage where it was a gym and you can actually see, I don't know its name, but you have like Machamp, a statue of Machamp with like the pre-evolution Machamp just sort of huddled up in his arms. It was kind of cute. Slash, a cool idea. But yeah, those probably would have been two of my favorite stages for two more standout-ish background elements, but there were certainly a lot of good ones. I remember like a carnival one in particular as well, and a haunted house. Actually, there was more stages than I really thought when I was going through the single battles. I was also surprised to see a few things in the single battles as well. Like you had an option like in between the battles. So, there would be certain status effects, and you can change what they are in single battle. I thought it would always remain consistent like it was in the campaign. And then there was also a team mode that I didn't know existed, and a said like some sort of item mode, but I didn't really notice any items. I don't know if I just wasn't good enough to access them or what. Maybe there was more of the like meter for your specials in that out there, and I just didn't really notice. Which was also nice to have specials for all the characters. That's not something I would have thought of, especially for like a first entry. And I don't recall Tekken itself ever really being super big with, those sort of special attacks. I guess as another side note with the gameplay, you see I've made a particular point to sort of pin some of my favorite fighters to fight as against some of my least favorite fighters to fight as. I guess I think Blastoise is my favorite. I don't know if this is like a Bayonetta-esque situation, because Blastoise was the very last character. I'm not too familiar with the history of the game, but I don't know if it was a little overpowered and they just never fixed it because it was pretty much done anyway. But I guess there's also the fact that I never evolved in Gen 1 at all, I think, actually. I didn't play it much at all, but I did pick Squirtle as my starter, so if I did play it more, I would have gotten Blastoise, so that's a thing. Pikachu Libre was pretty fun, as was the Chandelier Pokemon. Especially to that one, you would get like all these like status effects. I didn't know exactly how I was doing it, but it was working out pretty good. It was pretty tough to fight against that particular Pokemon as well. I also remember sort of dreading when I would see Lucario or Charizard show up, because they were pretty tough too. I'm probably going to butcher this name, but Suicune? That's another pretty good one. I like both Frost ones. Weevil was pretty fun. I like Suisun though, just because I forget the name for it, but it's the one fighter that fights on all fours in that, and I think that was pretty cool. And then like the whip things it has. I like Gardevoir and Braixen too, but I don't feel like I was particularly good with either of those characters. But I thought they were kind of unique and fun to play as, at least. Some of the characters I didn't like fighting as, though. I didn't. It sort of pained me too because I think Gengar is kind of a cool Pokemon, but I couldn't get a hold of it just because it was just such a weird play style. I feel like Krogunk also sort of similar situation. Um, I didn't really like Sceptile too much, or Decidueye. Aegislash was another disappointing one. I guess he's okay overall. I mean, I guess they're okay, but expectations were a bit higher for them. And in general, I feel like Blaziken, Machamp, and Darkrai were also on the lower end of enjoyment for me. I feel like I was leaning a little towards the power characters. I feel like that's kind of easy to do, especially when you're first learning the game. At least when it comes to some of the Pokemon I didn't mention yet in that. But there's also support sets, which I thought was interesting and unexpected. Like I said, for a first game, I was expecting a much more just basic core experience, but it was pretty cool. I kind of wish you could mix and mesh different supports. I don't know how that would affect balancing, but I don't know, maybe something for a sequel. One thing that's interesting is like you had, I forget if it's Braxton or Baxton or whatever, as a playable fighter, but then you also have Fennekin, the pre-evolution, as a support, which is fine. But then you got Krogunk on both for some reason, which seems like a really random pick. I don't really remember how that all happened. I kind of remember a little talk around it when, the game had its life cycle and that, but I don't know. In general, I do wonder if it will ever see a sequel. I think it should. I think there's definitely a lot of potential with this idea, and even thinking of how Pokemon has evolved since this game. Like, you saw a lot of mega evolutions here. Now I know there's Giganta maxing that they could throw in, and obviously a different, elements from regions and new Pokemon and that from the newer releases that aren't really here, or maybe they were here as DLC sort of late, maybe not as deeply sort of integrated in general for that generation as it could have been. But yeah, I don't really know how well it sold or anything, but it was at least a good experience for me.